The silver moon hung low over the whispering woods, casting elongated shadows through the ancient pines that bordered the packlands of Eldoria. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and wild herbs, a perfume that stirred the blood of every wolf under its glow. In the heart of the territory stood the gathering circle, a sacred ring of weathered stones etched with runes from forgotten alphas, where the pack convened under the lunar pull. Tonight, the full moon ritual beckoned, a night of mating bonds and destinies unveiled, where the goddess Selene whispered her choices to those who listened. Ilara Thorn moved through the throng of gathered wolves with the quiet grace of a shadow, her lithe form clad in the simple leathers of a border scout. At 25 winters, she was no delicate flower in the pack's hierarchy. Her hands bore the calluses of a warrior, forged from years patrolling the mist-shrouded fringes against rogue incursions and rival clans. Yet beneath her fierce exterior, the Omega mark burned, a subtle crescent scar on her collarbone, a reminder of her place in the pack's unyielding order. Omegas were the heart of the pack, the nurturers and empaths, but Ilara had always chafed against the chains of expectation. She dreamed not of litters and hearths, but of leading charges under the moon's fierce light. The pack's beta Garrick, a broad-shouldered male with fur as dark as midnight, had been her shadow for moons now. Whispers had swirled that he was her fated mate, the one whose scent had first ignited the pull in her veins during her first heat cycle 3 years past. But Garrick, ambitious and restless, had risen through the ranks on the strength of his prowess, his eyes always fixed on the Alpha's throne rather than the quiet bond they shared. Ilara had waited, her heart a guarded flame, hoping the ritual would seal what fate had hinted at. As the moon crested higher, the pack's howls rose in unison, a symphony of anticipation that vibrated through the ground. The elder, a wizened she-wolf with eyes like polished amber, stepped into the circle's center, her voice carrying the weight of tradition. By Selene's grace, let the bonds be revealed. Let mates claim what is theirs, and the pack grow stronger. One by one pairs emerged from the crowd, their scents mingling in euphoric harmony. Laughter and soft growls filled the air as hands clasped and lips met under the watchful stars. Ilara's pulse thrummed, her senses sharpening as Garrick's familiar musk, earthy pine and iron, drifted toward her on the breeze. She stepped forward, her chin lifted, ready to embrace the destiny that had eluded her for so long. But Garrick turned away, his gaze locked not on her, but on Mira, the lithe beta female from the eastern flank, whose golden fur gleamed in the moonlight. Mira's scent was bold, laced with the spice of challenge, and Garrick's eyes burned with a hunger that twisted Ilara's gut like a blade. The pull she felt snapped taut, then frayed as Garrick strode to Mira's side, his hand claiming her waist in a possessive arc. The pack fell silent, the weight of the moment pressing down like a storm cloud. "Ilara," Garrick said, his voice rough but steady, echoing in the hush. He didn't meet her eyes at first, his focus on Mira as if Ilara were already a ghost. "The moon has spoken. My path is with one who matches my strength, who can stand beside me in the hunts and the wars to come. Not as a scout's companion, but as an equal in the pack's future." The words landed like a public scourging. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, pity from the elders, smirks from the younger warriors. Ilara's cheeks burned, her Omega instinct screaming for submission, for retreat into the shadows. But she was no wilting bloom. She was Ilara Thorn, who had faced down a grizzly in the fog-veiled passes and returned with its pelt as a trophy. She straightened, her voice cutting through the tension like a drawn blade. "Fated or not, Garrick, you've chosen ambition over the bond. The moon doesn't lie, but men do." Laughter erupted from the fringes, cruel and biting, as Mira pressed closer to Garrick, her lips curving in triumph. "Poor Omega," she taunted, her tone dripping with false sympathy. "Some are meant for the front lines, others for the dens. Run along now, the real ritual is for those who belong." The pack's eyes bored into Ilara, stripping her bare. Humiliation coiled in her chest, hot and suffocating, mingling with the raw ache of rejection. The scent of her own distress, salty tears and bruised wildflowers, betrayed her, drawing sympathetic whines from the younger Omegas, but doing nothing to staunch the wound. She had trained her body to endure the wild's cruelties. But this was a blade to the soul, severing the fragile hope she had clung to through lonely nights on the borders. As the ritual devolved into celebration around her, Ilara slipped from the circle, the moon's light mocking her retreat. The woods enveloped her like an old friend, branches whispering secrets as she ran, her boots crunching over fallen leaves. Deeper into the shadows she went, until the pack's distant howls faded to echoes. There, by a crystal stream that reflected the lunar glow, she collapsed against a moss-covered oak, her breaths ragged. "Why?" she whispered to the night, fists clenched against the bark. The rejection wasn't just personal. It was a dismantling of her worth in the pack's eyes. An unmated Omega past her prime, worse, a warrior one, was a liability, a story for the firesides. She had poured her strength into protecting Eldoria's edges, scouting threats from the rival Silverfang clans to the north, yet now she was cast aside like yesterday's kill. Hours blurred as the moon wheeled overhead, its pull ebbing into the pre-dawn hush. Ilara rose, wiping her face with a trembling hand, resolve hardening in her veins. She wouldn't fade into obscurity. The borders called, and so did the wild unknown beyond. But as she turned toward the path that led to the outer wilds, a distant rumble shook the earth, a thunder of paws and the sharp tang of royal authority on the wind. From the east, where the palace spires pierced the tree line like fangs, came the Alpha King's vanguard. Kingthorn, no relation, though the name had always felt like a cruel jest, rode at their head, his massive black stallion snorting steam into the chill air. His presence was a force unto itself, the air thickening with the alpha command that bent lesser wolves to their knees. Ilara froze, her instincts warring between flight and the magnetic pull of his scent. Deep oak, storm winds, and something primal that stirred the embers of her rejected bond. He dismounted with predatory ease, his silver eyes scanning the woods as if he sensed her turmoil. The pack's rejection had been public, but the king's arrival felt like destiny's next twist, unforeseen and inexorable. In that moment, under the fading moon, Ilara wondered if the goddess had more in store than heartbreak, if the warrior within her was destined for a throne of her own making. The first rays of dawn pierced the canopy like hesitant fingers, gilding the mist that clung to the whispering woods. Ilara's breath steadied against the oak's rough embrace, but the tremor in her limbs lingered, an echo of the night's fracture. The rumble of approaching hooves grew insistent, vibrating through the soil like the heartbeat of an ancient beast. She pressed deeper into the shadows, her scout's instincts urging concealment, yet the alpha's scent wrapped around her, commanding, unyielding, laced with the salt of distant seas and the smoke of conquered foes. It pulled at her core, a gravitational force that made her wolf whine within, demanding recognition. King Alaric Thorn emerged from the tree line like a storm made flesh. At 30 winters, he was the unchallenged sovereign of Eldoria's packs, his frame broad and scarred from battles that had forged the realm's borders. His dark hair fell in waves to his shoulders, framing a face etched with the severity of rule. High cheekbones, a jaw like carved granite, and eyes the color of molten silver that missed nothing. Clad in supple black leathers adorned with the royal crest, a snarling wolf under a crescent moon, he dismounted with a fluid power that silenced the birds. His vanguard, a dozen elite warriors on steeds as black as night, fanned out, their gazes sweeping the underbrush with predatory focus. Ilara's heart hammered. To be found here, raw and exposed after the ritual's shame, was a vulnerability she could not afford. She shifted, a twig snapping under her boot like a betrayal. The king's head snapped toward the sound, his nostrils flaring as he inhaled deeply. "Show yourself," he commanded, his voice a low thunder that resonated in her bones, carrying the weight of pack law and royal decree. It was not a request, it was the Alpha's will, bending the air itself. She stepped forward, chin high despite the flush creeping up her neck. The warriors tensed, hands on hilts, but Alaric raised a fist, stilling them, his gaze locked onto hers, piercing through the remnants of her composure. Up close, his presence was overwhelming, a tidal wave of dominance that made her knees weaken, her Omega instincts urging submission even as her warrior spirit rebelled. Yet there was no cruelty in his stare, only a flicker of something deeper, like recognition in the dawn light. "Elara Thorne," he said, her name rolling from his tongue with an intimacy that startled her. How did he know? Scouts like her were footnotes in the pack's vast ledger, not names on the king's lips. "The winds carry tales of your valor on the borders. What brings a guardian of Eldoria to skulk in the wilds like a rogue?" The question hung heavy, laced with the unspoken. The pack's humiliation would reach him soon enough, the rejection broadcast under the moon's impartial gaze. She swallowed, tasting the bitterness of unshed tears. "My king," she replied, her voice steady though her pulse raced. "The ritual. It has ended for me. I seek no trouble, only the solitude of the woods to regroup." His eyes narrowed, scenting the lie in her evasion, the sharp tang of sorrow that no amount of resolve could mask. He stepped closer, the space between them shrinking until she could feel the heat radiating from his body, a counterpoint to the morning chill. The vanguard watched, their loyalty a silent wall, but Alaric's focus was solely on her. "Regroup?" he echoed, a hint of growl underscoring the word. "Or flee from the pack's judgment? Garrick's folly is known to me. He rejects what Selene offers, chasing shadows of power. But you are no shadow, Elara." The words struck like a balm and a brand. No one had spoken to her thus since her training days, seeing the warrior beneath the Omega's mark. Her scar tingled under her leathers, as if awakening to his proximity. She met his gaze, defiance sparking in her emerald eyes. "Folly or not, the pack has spoken. An unmated Omega is a burden, my lord. I will not burden you." A low rumble built in his chest, not anger but something primal, possessive. He circled her slowly, his scent enveloping her like a cloak, stirring memories of untouched heats and the ache of isolation. 6 months had passed since her last cycle's futile pull toward Garrick, a drought of connection that left her hollow. Alaric stopped before her, close enough that his breath ghosted her skin. "Burden?" he murmured, his voice dropping to a timbre that vibrated through her. "Do you mistake me for one who discards strength? The borders whisper of your kills, your vigilance against the Silverfangs. Eldoria needs such fire, not chained to dens or forgotten in the wilds." The vanguard shifted uneasily, the air thickening with the undercurrent of his intent. Elara's wolf stirred, a restless heat blooming low in her belly, unbidden and fierce. This was no mere scout's audience. It was acclaiming in all but words the Alpha King's intervention, weaving fate anew. "What do you propose, then?" she asked, her tone edged with challenge, though her body betrayed her, leaning imperceptibly toward him. Alaric's hand rose, hesitating before gently tilting her chin, his touch igniting sparks along her nerve endings. His silver eyes bored into hers, searching, commanding. "Come to the palace, as my guest under royal protection. The pack's laws bind you no longer in this shame. I will see you restored or elevated. Refuse, and the wilds may claim you, but know this: your destiny does not end in rejection." The offer dangled like a lifeline in a tempest, fraught with peril and promise. The palace loomed in her mind's eye, spires of ancient stone rising from mist-shrouded vales, halls echoing with the howls of courtiers and the weight of royal codes. To enter there as an Omega, especially one so publicly spurned, invited scrutiny, whispers of favoritism or worse. Yet his scent, his unyielding gaze, pulled at the frayed edges of her bond, mending what Garrick had torn. From the distance, the pack's morning calls rose, a cacophony of life resuming without her. Elara glanced back, the stream's murmur mocking her solitude, then turned to the king. "I accept," she said, the words tasting of steel and surrender. "But know this, my king, I am no one's prize to be polished. If I come, it is as Elara Thorne, warrior, not a broken Omega." A rare smile ghosted his lips, fierce and approving. "As you should be." He extended his hand, and as she clasped it, the connection hummed, a spark of something fated, electric under the skin. The vanguard parted as he led her to his stallion, lifting her onto the saddle with effortless strength before mounting behind. His body pressed against hers, solid and warm, as they rode toward the rising sun. The woods blurred past, pines giving way to rolling meadows where the palace's silhouette sharpened against the horizon. Ilara's mind raced, the rejection's sting dulling under the king's protective aura. Garrick's ambition had cast her adrift, but Alaric's intervention anchored her to uncharted waters, toward a court of intrigue, where power imbalances danced like shadows under the moon. In his arms' unyielding hold, she felt the first stirrings of transformation, a warrior's heart kindling anew, drawn inexorably toward redemption's flame. The grand spires of Eldoria's royal palace pierced the midday sky like the claws of a slumbering beast, their ancient stone facades veined with ivy that whispered of centuries under the moon's watchful eye. As King Alaric's stallion thundered through the wrought iron gates, the air shifted from the wild's crisp bite to the opulent hush of cultivated gardens, roses heavy with dew, their petals unfurling in crimson defiance, and fountains murmuring secrets to marble wolves frozen in eternal vigil. Ilara's grip tightened on the saddle's pommel, her body still attuned to the king's unyielding warmth at her back, his scent a constant anchor amid the disorientation. The palace was no mere stronghold. It was the heart of pack sovereignty, where alphas decreed fates and omegas wove the threads of loyalty, all bound by the sacred codes etched into the throne room's obsidian walls. They dismounted in the inner courtyard, where courtiers in silken tunics and embroidered cloaks gathered like shadows drawn to light. Whispers slithered through the crowd, eyes widening at the sight of an unadorned scout in leathers, perched beside the king like an errant falcon. Alaric's hand lingered at her elbow, a subtle claim that silenced the murmurs, his silver gaze sweeping the assembly with the weight of command. "Clear the way," he growled, low and resonant, the alpha timbre rippling through the air like a territorial rumble. The courtiers parted, their sense a tapestry of curiosity, envy, and veiled disdain, musk of high-born betas mingling with the floral notes of pampered omegas. Ilara followed him through arched corridors, lit by sconces of flickering beeswax, the stone floors cool beneath her boots, echoing her every step, as if the palace itself judged her intrusion. Servants bowed low, their deference automatic, but she caught the sidelong glances, the subtle flaring of nostrils scenting her lingering distress, the bruised wildflower edge that clung to her skin despite the ride's cleansing wind. In the royal wing, Alaric led her to a chamber overlooking the moonlit gardens, its walls draped in tapestries depicting legendary hunts, alphas in mid-leap, fangs bared under Seleni's glow, omegas at their sides as fierce equals in the old tales. "Rest here," he said, his voice softening as the door clicked shut behind the retreating guards. Alone with her now, the king's presence filled the space, his broad frame casting long shadows in the afternoon light, filtering through leaded glass. He poured water from a silver ewer into a basin, the liquid splash a soothing counterpoint to her racing pulse. "The healers will attend you soon. No one enters without my word." She nodded, sinking onto the edge of the four-poster bed, its linens scented with lavender and sage, calming herbs meant to soothe an omega's frayed nerves. But calm eluded her. The palace's grandeur pressed in, a gilded cage far removed from the border trails where she'd honed her solitude. This is too much," she murmured, her fingers tracing the intricate carvings on the bedpost, wolves entwined in eternal chase. "The court will devour me, my king. An omega like me, marked by rejection, they'll see only weakness." Alaric knelt before her, his knees meeting the rug with a warrior's grace, bringing his eyes level with hers. Up close, the scars on his knuckles told stories of battles she'd only heard in scouts' tales, clashes with Silverfang raiders under blood moons. "They see what I allow," he replied, his tone a velvet command laced with something warmer, almost tender. "And I see the fire that guarded my borders, while lesser wolves slumbered. Garrick's blindness does not define you, Ilara. Here, under my roof, you reclaim what was stolen." His words stirred the embers in her chest, but vulnerability clawed its way up unbidden. The rejection's ache had festered through the ride, mingling with the isolation of moons spent alone, her body a vessel of unfulfilled longing. She met his gaze, emerald eyes shimmering with unshed emotion. "Reclaim? It's been 6 months since my last heat called to him, and he turned away. I haven't had sex in 6 months," she confessed, the words tumbling out raw and unfiltered, her voice cracking like dry earth under the sun. Not with him, not with anyone. The bond pulled, but he chose power over me. I'm adrift, Alaric, not just in the pack, but in myself. How do I rise from that in a place like this? The admission hung between them, heavy as the moon's pull, her scent shifting to reveal the depth of her drought, earthy longing threaded with the salt of restrained tears. Alaric's breath hitched, his silver eyes darkening with a storm of empathy and restrained hunger. He reached out, his calloused palm cupping her cheek, thumb brushing a stray lock from her face. The touch was electric, a spark that ignited her wolf's dormant instincts, warmth blooming where rejection had left frost. "You speak truth that many hide," he said softly, his voice a rumble that vibrated through her bones. "But in this court truth is your blade. You've guarded the wilds alone, now let me guard you while you forge anew. No one claims you without your fire's consent." In the days that followed, the palace became her proving ground, a labyrinth of rituals and rivalries, where power imbalances danced like flames in the hearth. Mornings dawned with training in the sun-dappled arenas, where Alaric himself sparred with her, his strikes measured, teaching her the fluid forms of royal combat, their bodies brushing in ways that sent shivers through her core. "Strike like the storm you are," he'd murmur, correcting her stance, his hands lingering on her waist, igniting a slow burn that healed the hollows Garrick had carved. Afternoons brought the court's ceremonies, moonlit councils in the great hall, where betas vied for favor and omegas, wove alliances through subtle scents and shared glances. Ilara navigated it with wary grace, her warriors' tales earning nods from the elders, though Mira's spies, whispers from the outer packs, painted her as a usurper. One evening, during a ritual feast under chandeliers of antler and crystal, a high-born beta challenged her openly. "An Omega scout in the king's shadow? Surely a jest of the goddess," he sneered, his wine-scented breath hot with mockery. Alaric's growl silenced the hall, but Ilara rose, her voice steady as forged steel. "The goddess jests with fools who reject fate's call. I've spilled blood for Eldoria while you feasted. Judge me by deeds, not marks." The courtiers murmured approval, the shift palpable, her resilience cracking the court's rigid hierarchies. Nights were for quiet transformation, stolen moments in the palace gardens where fireflies danced like fallen stars. Alaric joined her there, their conversations deepening like roots seeking water. He shared fragments of his burdens, the weight of royal codes that demanded unyielding strength, the loneliness of a throne without a true mate. In turn, Ilara's confessions flowed freer, her laughter returning as she recounted border escapades, the warrior within blooming under his gaze. Yet tension simmered, the pull between them growing insistent, a forbidden undercurrent that promised redemption. As the moon waxed toward fullness once more, Ilara felt the stirrings of her own heat, not the desperate ache of before, but a fierce awakening. In Alaric's presence, rejection faded to embers, replaced by the promise of destiny's true weave. A bond forged not in ritual's haste, but in the slow fire of shared strength. The palace, once a cage, now cradled her ascent, toward revelations that would test the very heart of Eldoria's packs. The full moon's silver veil draped the palace gardens like a lover's sigh, turning the labyrinth of hedges and marble statues into a realm of whispered secrets. Fireflies pulsed in rhythmic harmony with the distant howls of the outer packs, their light mingling with the glow of lanterns strung between ancient oaks. Ilara wandered the paths alone, her leathers traded for a flowing gown of midnight silk that whispered against her skin, a concession to the court's evening rituals. The fabric clung to her curves, accentuating the warrior's lithe strength beneath, but it felt like armor forged in vulnerability, soft yet unyielding, much like the transformation stirring within her. Weeks had blurred into a tapestry of growth under Alaric's watchful eye. The arena's bruises had faded, replaced by the confidence of mastered strikes, her body remembering its power as if the rejection had been a forge's tempering flame. Yet nights like this, with the moon pulling at her veins, unearthed the undercurrents of her drought. The heat simmered low, not the frantic desperation of her bond with Garrick, but a deeper, resonant ache that Alaric's proximity only intensified. His scent lingered on the evening breeze, storm oak and primal earth, drawing her toward the central pavilion where the royal council convened under the stars. She paused at the edge of the gathering, shadows cloaking her as courtiers milled in clusters, their murmurs a low hum of intrigue. Alaric stood at the pavilion's heart, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the moon, addressing the elders with the unassailable authority of his bloodline. "The Silver Fangs encroach once more," he declared, his voice a resonant growl that carried to the garden's fringes. "Their raids test our borders, but we will not yield. Scouts report their Alpha seeks alliances through betrayal, whispers of pacts with disloyal hearts within our own ranks." Ilara's breath caught. Garrick's name hung unspoken in the air, a spectre from her past now woven into the realm's peril. She had heard fragments during training. His ambition had led him to court Mira's favor, and together they schemed for influence, trading secrets with the rival clan for promises of power. The revelation twisted in her gut, not with fresh pain, but with the sharp clarity of betrayal's full scope. It wasn't just her heart they had scorned, it was Eldoria's fragile peace. A rustle in the hedges drew her gaze, Mira sleek and golden-furred in her shifted form, slipping through the undergrowth like a thief in the night. Her eyes locked on Ilara, gleaming with malice before she melted into the darkness. The encounter ignited Ilara's instincts. She followed the trail of Mira's scent, spicy challenge laced with deceit, toward the palace's outer walls, where the wilds began to reclaim the stone. The chase led to a secluded alcove by the eastern gate, where moonlight pooled on weathered steps, descending to a hidden grotto. There Garrick waited, his midnight fur rippling as he shifted back to human form, clad in the rough leathers of a border raider. Mira stood beside him, her hand possessive on his arm, their scents intertwined in a bond forged not by fate, but by calculated hunger. "Ilara," Garrick sneered, his voice rough with false surprise, though his eyes betrayed the calculation of a predator cornered. "Skulking in the king's gardens? Even here you chase shadows." She stepped into the light, her posture unyielding, the Omega mark on her collarbone, no longer a chain but a badge of survival. "Shadows like you, Garrick. The council speaks of traitors, and your scent leads straight to the Silver Fangs. You rejected me for ambition, but this, selling our pack's blood for a scrap of power?" Mira laughed, a sharp, ceremonial trill that echoed off the stones, her body language a deliberate arch of dominance, shoulders back, chin lifted, as if Ilara were still the humiliated scout from the ritual. "Power recognizes power, little Omega. The king may dote on his stray, but Garrick and I see the future. Join us or fade into his harem like the untouched relic you are." The words struck at her core, dredging the confession she'd shared with Alaric, the 6 months of isolation, the unquenched fire that had left her adrift. But here, under the moon's impartial gaze, Ilara felt no fracture, only the steady burn of resilience. "Untouched? I forged myself in the wilds you fear, and the king, he sees what you blind fools ignore." Her voice rose, intense and laced with the raw emotion of her ascent, each word a ritual incantation reclaiming her worth. Garrick's face twisted, the pull of their old bond flickering like a dying ember in his eyes, regret perhaps, or the ghost of what might have been. He stepped forward, his alpha presence pressing against her, demanding submission. "You were meant for me, Ilara. The moon chose it. But you're wasted on borders and dreams. Come back. We can mend this, rule together against the throne." The offer dangled like poisoned honey, stirring the frayed edges of her past. For a heartbeat the humiliation resurfaced, the pack's laughter, the moon's mocking light, but it dissolved under the weight of her growth. Alaric's interventions had been more than protection. They were mirrors reflecting her untapped destiny, a warrior's path intertwined with royal fire. "Mend?" she echoed, her tone ceremonial, heavy with the power imbalance she now wielded through choice. "You shattered what Selene wove. My destiny isn't your shadow, Garrick. It's the throne's light or whatever flame I claim." Before Garrick could retort, a thunderous growl shattered the night. Alaric burst from the tree line, his form half-shifted, fangs bared in primal fury, silver eyes blazing with possessive rage. The air thickened with his command, bending the very mist to his will. Traitors, he snarled, his voice a seismic rumble that forced Garrick and Mira to their knees, their bodies trembling under the Alpha King's dominance. His gaze found Elara, softening imperceptibly, a silent acknowledgement of her strength in unveiling the truth. The vanguard arrived in a swirl of paws and steel, encircling the alcove as Alaric advanced. He reached Elara's side, his hand finding hers in a grip that was both shield and spark, their scents merging, storm and wildflower, in a harmony that drowned out the past. "You were right to follow your instincts," he murmured, low for her ears alone, his breath warm against her temple. "This revelation saves us all. Garrick's folly ends tonight." As the traitors were bound and led away, their protests dissolving into whines of defeat, Elara stood taller, the moon bathing her in ethereal light. The court's whispers would shift tomorrow, from scorn to legend, the Omega who exposed the rot within. But deeper still, in Alaric's touch, she sensed the unveiling of their own bond, a fated weave hidden by rejection's veil, destiny's true claim rising like the tide. Yet shadows lingered. The Silverfang's threat loomed larger, and in the king's eyes burned a hunger that promised more than redemption, a love forged in fire, waiting for the moon's next ritual to ignite. The moon's zenith bathed the palace in a cascade of silver, transforming the grand throne room into a sanctum of ancient power. Towering obsidian pillars rose like the spines of slumbering giants, etched with the Pack's sacred runes that glowed faintly under Celine's gaze, casting elongated shadows across the mosaic floor, a sprawling map of Eldoria's territories, wolves etched in gold thread, howling at the borders. The air hummed with the scent of smouldering sage from ritual braziers, mingling with the sharp tang of tension that clung to the assembled court. Courtiers lined the walls, their silken robes rustling like whispers of judgment, eyes wide with the weight of unfolding destiny. Elara stood at the throne's dais, her midnight silk gown pooling like liquid shadow at her feet, the fabric a second skin that traced the warrior's resolve etched into her form. Beside her, King Alaric commanded the space, his presence a gravitational force, broad shoulders squared under the royal cloak of deep crimson, edged with the snarling wolf crest. His silver eyes, once stormy with fury, now burned with a quiet intensity, fixed on the bound figures before them, Garrick and Mira, kneeling in chains forged from moon-silvered iron, their forms stripped of defiance, the sense sour with defeat and the acrid bite of regret. The Elder Council flanked the throne, their amber gazes solemn as they invoked the royal codes. "By Celine's eternal watch," the head elder intoned, her voice a ceremonial cadence that echoed off the vaulted ceiling, "we convene to unveil truths hidden in shadow. Traitors to the Pack, speak your confessions, or let the moon judge your silence." Garrick lifted his head first, midnight hair disheveled, his once ambitious eyes hollowed by the Alpha King's unyielding dominance. The power imbalance was palpable, a fallen beta reduced to supplicant, his body trembling under the weight of Alaric's proximity. "It began with ambition," he rasped, his tone laced with the raw edge of broken pride, glancing at Elara with a flicker of the old pull, now twisted into remorse. "The ritual. Rejecting you was the first fracture, Elara. Mira promised strength, alliances with the Silverfangs to topple the throne. We traded border secrets for their favor, believing we'd forge a new order, but the moon, she exposes all." Mira snarled beside him, her golden tresses matted, the spice of her challenge scent now dulled to desperation. "He lies to soften his fall," she spat, her voice ceremonial in its venom arching against the chains, as if to reclaim some shred of superiority. "Garrick sought the crown, but I saw the weakness in Eldoria's heart. An Omega like her, elevated by pity. We acted for the Pack's evolution, not betrayal. The Silverfangs offer what your codes deny, equality without marks or moons dictating fate," the court murmured, a wave of unease rippling through the air like a chill wind off the whispering woods. Elara's pulse thrummed, the revelation uncoiling in her chest, not just of treachery, but of the deeper wound. Garrick's rejection had been the seed of this rot, his ambition blinding him to the bond that might have steadied him. Yet standing here, under Alaric's protective shadow, she felt no pull toward forgiveness, only the steady forge of her own ascent, the Omega's vulnerability transmuted into unyielding steel. Alaric's growl rumbled low, a primal vibration that silenced the hall, his hand brushing Ilara's in a subtle anchor, warm, possessive, igniting the latent spark of their shared scent. Storm winds entwined with resilient wildflowers. Evolution through deceit, he thundered, his voice resonant with the Alpha's ceremonial authority, eyes locking on the prisoners with the inexorable force of pack law. You shattered sacred bonds for scraps from rivals. Garrick, your folly endangers the borders Ilara guarded alone. Mira, your whispers poison the heart of our unity. The codes demand exile, or death under the next blood moon. Ilara stepped forward, her emerald eyes meeting Garrick's, the intensity of the moment a ritual of closure. The power she wielded now was not born of title, but of truth unveiled, the warrior's courage that had chased shadows into light. You claimed I was meant for dens, not destiny, she said, her words measured and emotional, carrying the weight of 6 months' isolation, the unquenched fire she'd confessed in the chamber's hush. But Selene wove more than rejection. Your betrayal reveals my path, not as your shadow, but as Eldoria's guardian. The moon doesn't mend what ambition breaks. It forges the worthy from the ashes. Tears glistened in Garrick's eyes, the old bond fraying to nothing under her gaze, his voice cracking with vulnerable plea. Ilara. I see it now. The pull was real, but I chose wrong. Forgive me, let me— No, she interjected, her tone firm yet laced with the empathy of her Omega heart, a balance of passion and restraint. Redemption isn't claimed. It's earned in solitude, as I have. Go to the wilds, Garrick. Face the borders you sold. Perhaps there, under Selene's impartial light, you'll find your own transformation. Alaric nodded, his silver gaze softening on her, pride mingling with a deeper hunger. The forbidden love that had simmered through arenas and gardens, now cresting like the moon's tide. Exile it is, he decreed, the words sealing their fate with royal finality. The vanguard hauled the traitors away, their wines fading into the corridors, leaving the hall in hushed reverence. As the court dispersed, the brazier's flames danced higher, casting golden flickers across Alaric's face. He turned to Ilara, drawing her into the alcove behind the throne, a private sanctum of velvet drapes and moonstone carvings, where the air thickened with unspoken desire. You unveiled not just their deceit, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear, hand tracing the crescent scar at her collarbone with reverent touch, but our truth. The goddess chose you for me, warrior. From the moment I scented your fire in the woods, the bond stirred, fated, unbroken. Her heart swelled, the emotional arc complete. From public scourging to this pinnacle of destiny, her resilience the key to redemption. The drought of her body and soul ignited under his proximity, suggestive heat blooming without demand, a promise of intimacy woven in glances and shared breaths. And I for you, she whispered, her voice trembling with the depth of her growth, fingers threading into his hair. No more adrift. We've claimed what the moon intended. Under the silver veil, their lips met in a kiss that was ceremonial fire, intense, transformative, sealing the love that had risen from rejection's ruins. The palace hummed with the pack's renewed howls, echoing through the night as Eldoria's heart beat stronger. In Alaric's arms, Ilara Thorne stood not as Omega or warrior alone, but as queen in waiting, her destiny a blazing legacy under Selene's eternal grace. The Silverfang's shadows loomed, but together they would face the dawn, bound by love's unyielding light.